Now coming to a very important concept which is known as intervals. So intervals are basically names or labels that have been given to the sounds of the gaps or the distances between any two given notes. An in-depth training of intervals is very important as it helps us to figure out tunes by ear, eventually to figure out chords by ear, and to understand and memorize the fretboard in a meaningful way. Understanding intervals can be a really confusing and challenging topic for a beginner. So if you do it in this fashion, it will be really easy. The first thing you need to do is to rearrange all the 12 notes so that they start on the C and end on the C. So we will get this sequence: C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, and then we are back to the C. Now from this sequence, if we remove all the sharps, we get what is known as the C major scale. So we get this sequence C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, which is basically all the natural notes. Just we are starting on the C and ending on the C. A scale in simple language is any given sequence or set of notes which has a fixed intervallic formula. So if we study the intervals of the C major scale, we can apply it to form a major scale starting from any note. So the first interval in the C major scale is between the notes C and D. As we have a sharp, that is C sharp, between the notes C and D, the interval between these two notes is of a whole step, that is 2 frets apart on the guitar, and this is designated with a W. Similarly, between D and E, again we have a whole step as we have a D sharp between them. So we have a whole step and another whole step. Then we have E and F, which are consecutive notes as there is no sharp or flat between them. So this is an interval of half step. Then we have between F and G, G and A and B. Between all of these notes we have sharps. So these are all whole steps. So we have 3 whole steps. And then lastly between B and C we have a half step again because there is no sharp or flat between B and C. So we get this formula to form a major scale, which is whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. In this C major scale, the C, D, E, F, G, A, B and C are known as the scale degrees, and these are called as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7 respectively. 1 is also known as the root. So the C is the 1, D is the 2, E is the 3 and so on. In the Indian classical system, these scale degrees are designated as Sa, Re, Ga, Ma, Pa, Dha, Ni and Sa. In the Indian system, these notes Sa, Re, Ga, Ma, Pa, Dha, Ni, Sa are known as the Shuddha Swaras or the natural notes. The notes in between the Sa and the Re, which is also known as the Komal Re and is written in lowercase letters. Similarly, Komal Ga, Komal Dha and Komal Ni, these are the Komal Swaras and these are the same as flat, whereas the note between the Ma and the Pa is also known as the Ma Tivra, which is equivalent to sharp in the Western system. So this was just a brief idea about the Indian system, as this is also a very easy way to learn the intervals. So now let us come back to the C major scale. On your screen you can see that I have written what is known as the expanded C major scale. So we start on the C and ascend upwards to D, then E, F, G, A, B and C again, and then we continue upwards again D, E, F, G, A, B, C. So here the scale degrees starting from the lowest C will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and then the 8 and the 1 are the same. And then if we go into the next higher pitch, which is the D note, that becomes our 9th. So the 9th and the second scale degree are basically the same, just the octave is different. One will be a higher pitch, which is the 9th, and the lower pitch is known as the 2nd. The E in the higher octave is still called as the third, although you can call it the 10th. Similarly, F, which is the fourth in the lower octave, can also be called as the 11th scale degree. G by convention is called as the fifth, not the 12th. And lastly, the A, which is the sixth in the lower octave, can also be called as the 13th. So we have three new scale degrees, the 9th, the 11th and the 13th. Now let us have a look at the intervals between each of these notes with respect to the root, which is C in this case. So the first interval that is there in the major scale is the interval between the first and the second note, which is C and D. In the Indian system, this is Sa and Re Shuddh Swars. This is known as the major second, or in the higher octave, it's the major ninth, which is written as capital M2 or capital M9. And in the modern system, you can simply call it as an interval of 2 or 9. And this sounds bright and quite pleasant. The major second interval starting from the C note. Here the C note is held down on the third fret of the fifth string. And for the major second, the major second interval starting from the note C. The C note here is on the fifth string, third fret, and the D, which is the major second apart, is the open fourth string. So first I'll be playing these two separately and then together. And this same interval played in a higher octave is the major ninth. So we have the C over here, and the D in the higher octave is here on the third fret of the second string. So the next interval is that between the first note and the third note, which is the C and the E, or the Sa and the Ga in the Indian system. This is known as the major third and is written as capital M3. This is also known as an interval of 3 and it sounds very pleasant and happy. The major third, again we are holding down the C note and I'm playing the E note, which is available on the second fret of the fourth string. So and again I can plug them together. Now coming to the next interval, which is the gap between the first and the fourth note of the C major scale. So from the C to the F or Sa to the Ma Shuddh Swars, this is known as the perfect fourth. This should ideally be called the major fourth, but it sounds so stable that it's called as a perfect fourth and it's designated as capital P with a 4. And in modern terms, we can also call it an interval of 4 or 11 in the higher octave. For the perfect fourth, again C and F this time, which is right below the C, which is on the third fret of the fourth string. So and in the higher octave, this would be the 11th. So here is the F note in the higher octave, first fret of the first string. The next interval is between the first and the fifth note of the C major scale, which is C to G or Sa to Pa. This is known as the perfect fifth again, because it is a very stable consonant and pleasant sound. Perfect fifth, again I'm playing the C note and then the open G string, open third string. The next one is the interval between the C to the A or the Sa to the Dha, and it's called as the major sixth, or you can also call it an interval of 6 or 13, and this is one of the most melodic and beautiful sounding intervals in the major scale. Major sixth is the interval between C and A. So we have a C over here and A is on the second fret of the third string. The same interval played in the higher octave. Here the A is available on the fifth fret of the first string. So now the next interval is between the first and the seventh note of the major scale, or the C to the B, that is Sa to the Ni, and it's called as the major seventh, which is designated as capital M7, and it sounds beautiful, but there is a certain element of clashiness or dissonance to the sound. Major seventh is between C and the B. B is the second open string. The last interval that exists in the major scale is that between the first and the eighth, or between the two C's. So this is known as perfect eighth or unison or an octave, and obviously it will sound very stable because we are just playing the same note in different pitches, low pitch and high pitch. Now we'll be looking at the minor intervals, and this is very easy to understand now that you already know the names of the major intervals. So you know that the interval between the C and the D note is the major second. So the interval between the C and the D flat, or the C sharp, or the Sa and the Komal Re, is known as the minor second. So C to D is the major second, C to D flat is the minor second, and in modern terms it is also called as an interval of flat 2 or flat 9 in the higher octave, and this sounds pretty harsh and dissonant. Minor second interval is between the C and the D flat, also known as the C sharp, which is just a fret above this. And in the higher octave, this is on the second fret of the second string. Similarly, C to E is known as the major third. So C to E flat, or the D sharp note, can also be called as the minor third, and this is the gap between Sa and the Komal Ga in Indian classical system. So this is known as the flat 3 or the sharp 9, and this sounds quite sad and tense, but not as harsh as the minor second. Minor third is between the C and the E flat. This is on the first fret of the fourth string. So in the higher octave we have an E flat over here, fourth fret of the second string. Now coming to probably the most recognizable interval of all, which is known as the tritone, and this is the interval between the C and the F sharp, which is basically the interval between Sa to the Tivrama. It's also known as augmented fourth, minor fifth, or tritone, and in modern terms you can call it an interval of sharp 4 or sharp 11 or even a flat 5, and this sounds very suspenseful and tense and is instantly recognizable. Tritone interval, C and F sharp. This This F sharp is on the 4th fret of the 4th string, by the way, or in the higher octave on the 2nd fret 1st string. This is the sharp 11. Now the next interval is the minor 6th. You know that the major 6th is the interval between C and A. So the interval between C and A flat will be called as the minor 6th. This is the interval between the Sa and the Komal Dha, and it's also called as interval of sharp 5 or flat 6 or flat 13, and this sounds pretty tense and dissonant. Minor 6th, C and the A flat, which is on the 1st fret 3rd string, or the 4th fret of the 1st string. Now coming to the last minor interval, you know that the C to the B is known as the major 7th. So the C to the B flat or the A sharp note will be called as the minor 7th interval. This is Sa to the Komal Ni, and it's also called as interval of flat 7, and it sounds dissonant. The minor 7th is between the C and the B flat. So to summarize, all major intervals are consonant, that is, they are pleasant to listen to, except for the major 7th interval, which is a dissonant or a clashy interval. All minor intervals sound dissonant. Similarly, intervals can be calculated starting from any note.